effectively, it's the first person who receives the ball from the scrum half. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be the number 10. It doesn't have to be the fly half. It's anybody who's in that first receiver role. And so I think often we get frustrated sometimes maybe when somebody who isn't meant to be in that position ends up in that position. And I'm like, get out, you're not meant to be there, you're not meant to be there. But what we don't do is teach that person what they should be actually doing in that role. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. It's going to take us about 30 minutes, 35 minutes, again, short and sharp. And then, so just before we do begin, what are the principles of attack? And I think this is a really important question. If you've ever done your level 200 or level 300, this comes up a lot because a lot of the time the players don't know what the principles of attack are. So the principles of play in attack, and they're effectively the foundation for any good attack. So if we know what they are, we can then start to coach that first receiver a bit better. So let's just shout out or put in the chat what we think the principles of attack are.
Are you talking like one of the things that we look at is going forward with possession, with support, creating pressure on the defense?
Pretty good attempt. Pretty good attempt. You got most of them in there. Most of them in there. Dirk, what do you think?
Well, for me, looking at going forward, like you said, possession, creating pressure, I think those are the only three things that I do remember of it.
Okay. Look, so we've got the right mindset, right? So the first thing that we need before we do anything in attack is, and this is not a trick question, we need one element of the game more than any other element in order to have an effective attack. We need the ball, right? And so the first thing we need to do is gain possession. Once we gain possession, we can then, Maria, as you said, we can go forward, okay? And then what do we need in order to keep the ball? So we go forward, what do we need? To keep hold of the ball.
You need support from your other players, because if you are defended against, you're going to need to be able to send that ball out to somebody else.
We need support, right? And look, the principles of attack or the principles of play, they're not there to trick anybody. It's very, very basic and simple. It's we gain the ball, we go forward, we get tackled. We get tackled, we need support. We then keep the ball alive, we maintain continuity, we keep applying pressure, and then we score. Right? And that's basically how we attack is we gain the ball, we go forward, we have our support players, we maintain the ball, we maintain continuity, we keep the ball alive, we keep applying pressure, the defense breaks down, and we score a try. Very, very simple. And so if the players understand this, we can then talk around how they can be more effective, especially in that first receiver position. So what are we looking for in a first receiver, do we think?
The first receiver basically has to have the vision to see what is in front of them as far as what the opposition are going to do, if they're uptight, if they have holes, that kind of stuff.
Okay, so we're looking at the defensive positioning to begin with, absolutely. And you say, we're looking for holes, and so what we're effectively looking for is we're looking for spaces, right?
Yeah.
We're looking to find where is that space, and so my lovely little parking lot image here. We're looking for space. What we're not looking for are faces. All right, so spaces over faces. Okay, so we get rid of the faces, we find the space. We get the face, we need to move away from that. And that's quite a little a good little tool that you can take away when you're coaching players is spaces, not faces. Like, how often does that first receiver always just go, okay, well, there's 3 players in front of me, I'm just going to take the ball in, right? We don't always want to find the faces, we want to find the spaces. I mean, so these are our options, right? We can either run the ball, we can kick the ball, or we can pass the ball when we're looking for those spaces. So we could sometimes find a gap in front of us, and we can run through that as the first receiver. We can pass the ball maybe to the inside, the outside with a drop ball or a tip option, or we can play out the back. And then we can kick either in behind the defense or a cross-field kick. Is there any other options apart from these 3, do you think?
Yeah,
Not if you want to keep possession.
Do you say not if they want to keep possession?
Yeah.
Do we think
the only other option I'm not seeing there is taking the ball in. Basically taking it in, setting it up, and starting it over with a new foundation.
yes, so that would be run, right? So, there's only 3 options really that you can do as a first receiver. You can run with the ball, you can pass the ball, or you can kick it. And so when we break it down like that, it's actually not that complicated. Yet we find that first receiver position actually struggles to make decisions, which is very interesting considering there's only 3. And most of the time we have players who sometimes can't kick. So then that takes it only down to 2 decisions, and we still manage to mess that up sometimes. So it's very interesting when we put ourselves in that first receiver position, how we can actually manipulate the defense and how we can actually make decisions over being flustered and jump out. I often use a saying, so like my spaces, not faces. I actually say that you've got 2 options really. You run hard or you pass early. And so you may see your players when they'll run up to the line and then they'll panic and throw the ball away. And that doesn't do any good for anybody. So if you're able to make the decision that I'm going to pass early, so as soon as I catch it, I'll move the ball, or I'm going to run, I won't run hesitant, I'll just run hard. And that way, at least, I can actually try and get over the gain line and make some yards. So when can we use these? When can we use these options? When can we use these options, and who do we need to help us?
But if you're getting the ball from the scrum half or whoever is basically out of the rock scrum, whatever it is, and you're the first person out, depending on the position on the field, would depend on what you're using generally. I mean, in the attacking half of the field, you normally use like the pass or the run more than the kick, where the kick would be more out of the defense, trying to get out of your own defensive zone to kind of reboot it. And I would think you're looking at your wingers, depending on the type of kick. If you go in open field, you'll be looking at your centers to go through on like a grubber kick or something like that.
I mean, I think that's pretty spot on, right? Especially in the 15s game.
Yep.
So if we're looking to exit, there's multiple ways we can exit, but probably the most effective way to exit is to use the kick. If we're in the opposition half, depending on what their defensive setup is, we can then start to maybe look at a running option or a pass option. And then even if we want to, we can use the kicking option if that's on. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to talk through some things in terms of the actual, what they're actually looking for. So we're going to look at it from a sevens point of view, because sevens is a lot easier to break down and find spaces because obviously there's less players. And so when we look at this positioning here, we'll label this person number 1. So number 1 is in that first receiver position. Where are they looking right now? What do you think they're looking at? If we say that this is,
They're going to be the first one receiving the ball, even in sevens. sure they're going to be looking at the ruck.
Yeah, perfect. So this is what happens, right? We look at the ruck, we're looking at that ball, and as soon as that happens, what tends to happen with this body position? Do we stay where we are? Do we move out, or do we come towards the ruck?
Usually,
Majority of the time, they tend to want to step in towards the rock.
Yeah, excellent. We step in towards the ruck because that's where we're looking. So our natural movement is going to be towards the ball. If that's the case, how do we keep their distance away from the ruck? Where should they be looking now? So we know the ball's in the ruck because we've just watched the carrier come in. What do we need to do now is we need to get this number one to have a look at where their first attacker is, but we need to have a look at the bigger picture, right? So this first receiver now needs to scan the whole area. So if I was to ask you guys, if you're the number one, what do you see in front of you right now?
A flat line, basically man on man.
Yep. How many defenders?
4 up and 1 back.
Yep. So perfect. However, what are we looking for?
Yeah.
We're looking for spaces, not faces, right? So,
Yep.
so what you could say is there's space there, space here, space here, space here, space here. So I see 5 gaps, right? So this is what we need to get into the habit of when we're looking at that first receiver role or any kind of attack role, but specifically with the first receiver is, okay, here's a gap, here's a gap, here's a gap, here's a gap, not 1 player, 2 player, 3 player, 4 player. Because as soon as we start looking at those players, what are we probably going to do?
you're looking at the,
So just like when we look at the ball and we're drawn towards the ball. So we look at the ball, we start to move towards it. As soon as we see these players, okay, we're going to start to be drawn towards the players. So what we need to do is start to recognize this gap before we recognize the players. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
So if we have a good first receiver, and when I say good, it's a player that is looking at everything, looking at all their options. So what's going through their head, do you think?
Get in ball in time to take advantage of the space that they see in front of them.
Yeah, so the time that the ball takes to come from here, so that if they're a good first receiver, before they get to the ruck, they're scanning everything. Where's the space? So the space is in behind. It's in behind here. The sweeper is in this position. We have a flat line, like you say, of 4 defenders, which means there's 5 gaps. Okay, we're looking actually as well at the breakdown itself, because the breakdown itself will dictate, depending on how they've presented the ball. Marie, we did that in the first week, in that kind of that 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of formation. How they present the ball dictates where they're going to stand. Who's actually passing them the ball will then dictate as well where they're going to stand. Who's opposite them in defense? What's my number 2 doing? What's my number 3 doing? How wide are we going? So there is so much that first receiver, if they're a good first receiver, will start to look for. The challenge then is making those decisions, right? So we could drop this player back here, move that player here. Let's put this player back deeper. We're going to get a really good pass. What are the options that this first receiver can take right now?
they can either go to the left or the right. If they go to the left, they're going to draw in the 2 defenders that are in that line, which is going to create more space for that second receiver.
So if I angle towards this way and I catch the ball and they come in here, I think what you're saying is that if we run that kind of line, this third player can come through this gap. Is that what you're saying? If they angle towards it? Yep. Okay, so there's one.
Second person quick enough.
Yeah, if the handling's good enough, right? So we've got that option. What about just moving the ball straight to 3? Can we do that?
Yeah.
Right, because
It gives the defense more to adjust, but yeah.
Okay. What about a kick over here? What about attacking this channel? Attack this channel and utilize this 2v1.
Yeah.
Right, there's one opportunity here as well. So there's so much that we can actually look at that first receiver. And a lot of the time in 7s and in 15s, probably more in 15s as well, is that we just look for this player to pass the ball out. Right, we don't actually look at what that first receiver can do, how that first receiver can be very, very effective, and how they become an attacking threat. Normally this number 1 is just a pivot. They just move the ball away from the contact area. What about if they were to come in close and the 9 who's just passed the ball loop around into this channel? There's so much we can do, right? So let's mix this up. Let's put the defense like this. So we've got 3 in the ruck and defense, and we've got 3 in the breakdown who are really nice and condensed. What is this first receiver seeing or listening to right now?
Space on the outside.
Huge amounts of space, right? So what were they tempted to do maybe?
Runs all the way to 3, or try to run it themselves.
I mean, that probably happens a lot, right? When maybe especially in youth rugby, is we'll get this number 1 and they'll go, actually, look at all that space. I'm going to take it up and I'm going to run all this way myself. Where actually, when we do that, the defense will just slide over. So what we want is we probably want the 1 to be a pivot. We probably want the ball just to go across to the 2 and the 3, right? Quickly. Why is it then that we get into this struggle zone here with this number 1 when there's so much space that we can move the ball into?
A lot of the time it's because where they stand. Majority of them, I don't know, they look at the ball and the player on the inside. They panic on getting the ball from point A to point B in a pass. You know, there's no fluidity. They are so accustomed picking up the ball and taking it in that the ball tends to come, stop, and then they have to kind of shuffle to get it back out. And a lot of them, at least my players, I have a good bit of them that have never been able to your point, never been able to kick the ball at any kind of skill level at all to be able to get it to go where they want it to go.
Yeah, so I think it's very interesting, right? So what tends to happen is it's very obvious if you're this player here, let's call that number 7. If you're number 7, it's very obvious whether you win this contact battle. Blue and blue are coming in, blue and 7 are coming in. It's very obvious whether you win that battle or not. So, okay, fine, we've won the contact area. It's very obvious if you're making a pass from 9 to 10 on the 3 to the first receiver, that pass is a good pass. What's very hard and where a lot of players struggle is understanding whether they've made the right decision. And that's very difficult to quantify. So it's very easy to see our 7 is pushing over the blue team, so they've won the ball. It's very easy to see that this player run between three or 4 defenders and then score a try. It's very, very difficult for this person to gain any kind of real metrics or success around what they've done. So if they were to move the ball straight away to this player and then to this player, who then knocks the ball on, how often do we give this number 1 praise for recognizing the space out wide and moving the ball fast to the 3? Or do we just focus on the fact that the 3 has dropped the ball? Hands up. Who's done that? Put your hands up. Let me see them. Who will talk to the number 3 versus praise the number 1?
I've no shame. I'd do it.
I've definitely done it multiple times.
Yes.
So it's very important that we recognize what this number one is doing and give them more praise so that they tend to get back into that position and keep making those decisions. Because the hardest thing to do as a rugby player is make effective, positive, good decisions over and over and over again. The first time that you mess up in that first receiver role, the first thing that you'll do is you'll just go, nope, not doing that. Somebody else can fill in there. And then what we do is we never actually develop that vision that we're looking at or we're talking about. So if we look at another piece, let's say we've got 7 players up. Okay, that first receiver, they're coming from this channel here, so they're running this angle because they've been late for whatever reason. They're coming in and they're running that kind of arc, that J line. What is their option when they receive the ball at this point?
You're going in between those two defenders. It's pretty much just contact, but you're going to be on your own unless whomever sent the ball out followed their pass.
Yeah. So I think what you're saying is that if they come into here, you're looking for this player to come and hit the ruck, maybe, and maybe this player to hit the ruck, but they're pretty isolated, right?
Yeah.
So what would be the option, do we think?
For me in sevens, I mean, I would basically, if coming in there at the fly half position, just basically taking a couple steps towards the second player on the opposite side and put the ball over the top.
And
Have
kick it?
3 players running through onto it.
Yeah, so excellent. So what we've done is we've identified the space in behind, right? So we identify the space in behind and say, hey, well, why not just kick it? And then, like you say, we've got these 3 players who can then come through. Remember, what are our options at that first receiver? What options can we have?
Pass, kick, and run.
Run, pass.
Pass, kick, and run, right? So if we pass, kick, and run, the kicking option is probably the best one right now. Put the ball into that space. Remember, what are we looking for?
Space.
Space is not faces. It sounds silly, and especially when it's laid out this way, but we're looking for spaces, not faces. So there's something that I teach a lot when we're looking at attack. So we talked about the principles of play, but this is something that I teach over and over again with any team, whether it's men, women, sevens, 15s, high school, elite, whatever it is. So we have our principles of attack that we talked about: game possession, go forward, support, maintain continuity, apply pressure, score. But I talk about the 6 S's of attack, and this kind of applies for any player, but specifically, mainly for that first receiver. And I'll give you this one for free. So the first thing we have to do is scan. What do we scan for?
Scan space to see where the space is.
And once we've identified that space, what do we need to do?
Make the decision as to how you're going to utilize it.
Yeah. So do we make that decision slow or fast?
Fast.
And then once we've made that decision, what do we need?
Execute it.
These are my 6 S's of attack, right? So we need to, that first receiver gets the ball. Before they get the ball, they're doing a complete scan of the field. What are they doing? Okay, where's the ball coming from? What's the space in behind? What are these defenders doing? What are my support players doing? And I've made a decision. So once I've scanned and I've found the space, I then need the ball as quickly as possible to then execute that decision. Because if this space is here and they see that I noticed that space, they may probably drop a player and that space has then disappeared. So then what I need to do is I need to identify that there's space over here, right? So always looking for space, always looking for that space. So then what I need is the support of my teammates, because I can't just get the ball and kick the ball over the top without this player coming through. So I need that support. And then Dirk, you talked about your players not having the ability to put the ball when they want, where they kick it. That's where the skills come in, right? We have to be using these skills to be able to put the ball where we want to. So whether that's a pass, whether that's a running contact, okay, and looking for a 2v1 or an offload or putting the ball into space, what we have to do is have those skills, and then obviously we have to finish, which is the score piece. Do those successes make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
And it's a really for me it's coaching attack is quite a abstract concept, but it can be broken down really quite simply in terms of the principles of play, the spaces not faces, the run pass kick options, okay, run hard, pass early, and then using the right times to use those options, using the right people, but then also using these successes and having actually been able to scan, find that space, make a decision, get the ball out there fast, and really utilize that space, because as soon as that space is there, it disappears just as quickly as it appears. So those successes are vital for any kind of first receiver really looking to progress themselves. And it doesn't have to be anyone who is a fly half or a 10. Okay, it can be a prop. They have to do the same thing. If we have a prop in 15s, they have to identify, right, where's the space? Do I move the ball through here? Do I take it up? Do I run? Can I move the ball out to my support player? So whether it's if we kind of condense this a touch, and let's say you often see this kind of formation in 15s. The ball comes from 9 to a prop, right? In that first receiver role, they have to make a decision. Do I pass the ball back inside to this player? Do I tip it on to this player over here? Okay. Do I even then maybe pull the ball out the back and it comes to me and it comes to this player, right? Because we've identified that the space is out wide over here. And so if I utilize any of these players here coming forward, we're not actually using that space out wide. So I can move the ball to the one out to this player who can then maybe put a kick in and then out there to that space. Because again, if we look at the successes, we've scanned, we found the space, we need to get the ball there straight away. I've rambled a little bit there and I've thrown a lot of information at you. Do you guys have any questions on this?
No.
Are the 6 S's useful?
Yes.
Maybe a different way to see the game. What about our spaces not faces? Is that a useful tool?
Our coach uses that exact term.
And then what about the not limiting the options, but making them obvious that you only have to make 3 decisions, or you've only got 3 options to make, right? It doesn't have to be as complicated as it seems. It's just being able to understand before we receive the ball, what's in front of us and what option we can take. So just to end, if we take away these players again, let's look at it from a 7 standpoint. If we were in this kind of formation, what's our first receiver going to do from here? What's their first thing they're going to do? Before they get the ball, what's the first thing they're going to do?
With that, they can easily just second or third.
Dirk, what did you say?
Scan so they could see where the space is.
Yeah, I mean, so again, it's not a trick question, right? So, Maria, I couldn't hear what you said, but I think it was pass the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
send it out time the second or third.
yeah, so you've skipped a few steps there, right? So if we look at the pass of the ball, it's probably the fifth step. And so what we have to do is we have to scan first, right? And that's where it becomes very difficult, because remember when we first looked at this diagram, what's the first receiver probably looking at? They're probably looking at the ball straight away. They're not looking at this space over here. So I think if there was a biggest takeaway, it's having that first receiver look towards the other side of the field first. Okay, so you may have heard the saying before: corner flag, post, post, and then corner flag. Right. So if we can get the players to start looking at this corner flag over here, first post, second post, and then the third, and then the second corner flag, we're starting to scan across the whole field then. And when we're coaching this first receiver position, let's say the ball goes across, great pass, okay, great pass, knock on. What should we do now as coaches?
Well, coming back to what you said, praise the first receiver for making the decision that they made.
Absolutely. Praise that number one for recognizing that the space is out here and they're moving the ball and they've made the decision to get the ball out wide straight away. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah.
Lots of information, but hopefully beneficial and something that we can take away. Great to see a couple more people on the call this time. So let's work towards next week. And again, if you guys have got any questions around any of this stuff, please shoot me an email. Happy to have one-on-one conversations and go into a bit more detail one-on-one with people if needed. Sound good?
Yes, sir.
Thank you guys. Appreciate you jumping on a Monday again.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.